April 1945. Germany. The war is almost over. Allied armies are closing in from all sides. Berlin is surrounded. Any rational person can see that the Third Reich has weeks, maybe days left. And somewhere over the smoking ruins of what used to be a German city, an American P-51 Mustang takes another hit from anti-aircraft fire. The engine seizes. Smoke fills the cockpit. The pilot has been here before. Many times before. He's been shot down over France, over Belgium, over the Netherlands, over Germany, multiple times over Germany. He's bailed out a burning aircraft, crash-landed in enemy territory, been captured by the Wehrmacht, escaped from prisoner of war camps, walked hundreds of miles through enemy territory to rejoin his unit. And every single time, once he made it back, he volunteered to fly again. His name is Colonel Hubert "Hub" Zemke, and he is either the bravest or the most stubborn pilot in the entire 8th Air Force. His fellow pilots can't decide which. His commanders have stopped trying to ground him. His enemies have stopped believing he can be killed. This is the story of a man who was shot down 7 times, captured 3 times, and refused to stop fighting until the war literally ended around him. A pilot whose personal war became legendary, whose survival seemed impossible, and whose determination represented everything about the American fighting spirit in World War II. But to understand Hub Zemke, we need to go back to the beginning. Because this wasn't a man who started out trying to be a hero. He just refused to quit. Hubert Zemke was born in 1914 in Missoula, Montana, to German immigrant parents. He grew up speaking both English and German fluently, which would later prove useful in ways he never expected. He was a good student, athletic, and fascinated by aviation from an early age. In the 1930s, when aviation was still relatively new and dangerous, Zemke joined the U.S. Army Air Corps. He wasn't a natural pilot in the romantic sense. He didn't dream of dogfights and aerial glory. He approached flying like an engineer, studying aerodynamics, tactics, and aircraft systems with methodical precision. By 1941, Zemke was an experienced pilot and instructor. When the United States entered World War II after Pearl Harbor, he was exactly the kind of officer the Army Air Forces needed: experienced, competent, level-headed. He was sent to England in 1942 as part of the 8th Air Force buildup. The 8th Air Force was tasked with daylight strategic bombing of Germany. The theory was that American bombers, flying in tight formations with overlapping defensive fire, could fight their way to targets in Germany, drop their bombs accurately in daylight, and fight their way back. The theory was partially wrong. The bombers could reach Germany, but the casualties were catastrophic. In 1943, before long-range fighter escorts were available, some bombing raids lost over 20% of their aircraft. That's not sustainable. You can't run a war when 1 in 5 planes doesn't come back from every mission. Zemke was assigned to command the 56th Fighter Group, flying P-47 Thunderbolts. His job was to escort the bombers, protect them from German fighters, and bring his own pilots home alive. He was 29 years old and responsible for dozens of pilots, most of them younger than him, many of them on their first combat tour. Zemke approached command the same way he approached flying: methodical and aggressive. He studied German fighter tactics. He developed new formations that gave his fighters better coverage. He led from the front, flying more missions than many of his subordinates. And he had one unbreakable rule: always bring your wingman home. The 56th Fighter Group became one of the most successful fighter units in the 8th Air Force. They shot down hundreds of German aircraft. They protected countless bombers. And they did it while taking fewer losses than comparable units, because Zemke emphasized tactics and discipline over individual heroics. But you can't fly combat missions over Germany without eventually getting hit. The first time Zemke was shot down was almost mundane. A German fighter got a lucky burst into his P-47 during a dogfight over the Netherlands. The engine died. Zemke glided the aircraft as far as he could, trying to reach Allied lines, but he came down in German-occupied territory. He landed the damaged Thunderbolt in a field, climbed out, and started running. He spoke German fluently, so he tried to pass as a Dutch laborer. For 3 days he evaded German patrols, heading west toward the Allied lines. He was caught by a German patrol on the 4th day. The Germans were actually quite surprised when they realized they'd captured an American fighter group commander. Zemke was sent to a POW camp for interrogation. The Germans tried to get tactical information from him: formations, tactics, radio procedures, anything useful. Zemke gave them name, rank, and serial number. Nothing else. After 2 weeks of interrogation that went nowhere, Zemke was transferred to a permanent POW camp. He was there for exactly 3 days before he escaped. He and 2 other officers managed to slip out during a nighttime air raid when the guards took cover. They made it about 30 miles before being recaptured. Back to the camp, this time with a warning: escape again and you'll be shot. Zemke didn't care. 2 weeks later he escaped again, this time through a tunnel some prisoners had been digging. He made it further this time, almost to the Swiss border, traveling at night and hiding during the day. A German patrol caught him near the border. The Germans were getting frustrated. This American kept escaping. They transferred him to a higher security facility. But before he arrived, Allied forces liberated the area and Zemke was freed. He immediately reported back to his unit and requested to return to flight status. His superiors tried to ground him. He'd been through interrogation, multiple escape attempts, weeks of deprivation in POW camps. He needed rest, medical evaluation, psychological assessment. Zemke refused. He wanted to fly. They compromised. He could fly, but no more combat missions. He'd do training and test flights. Zemke agreed, then immediately started flying combat missions anyway, just not officially. His commanders knew, but looked the other way, because Zemke was too valuable as a combat leader. The second shootdown came over Belgium in early 1944. Flak hit his P-47 and set the engine on fire. Zemke bailed out, landed behind German lines again, and again started walking west. This time, he was caught within 24 hours. Back to interrogation, back to a POW camp, back to planning an escape. This time he was in the camp for almost 2 months before he managed to escape during a transfer between camps. The train was stopped by Allied air attack, and in the chaos, Zemke and several other prisoners ran into the woods. He made it back to Allied lines after a week of walking. By now, Zemke's story was becoming legendary in the 8th Air Force. The pilot who couldn't be kept down, shot down twice, captured twice, escaped twice, back to flying. His squadron mates started joking that the Germans should just give up trying to hold him because he'd always escape. But Zemke's luck was about to run out, or maybe his luck was about to save his life in the strangest possible way. In August 1944, Zemke was transferred to command the 479th Fighter Group, which was transitioning from P-38 Lightnings to P-51 Mustangs. The P-51 was the best fighter aircraft of the war, with range enough to escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. But it was also a temperamental aircraft that required careful handling. Zemke was flying a mission over Germany in October 1944 when his formation encountered a severe thunderstorm. These weren't normal storms. These were massive weather systems that could tear aircraft apart with turbulence and icing. Standing orders were to avoid them, but Zemke's bombers were on the other side of the storm, and they needed escort. He led his fighters into the storm. The turbulence was worse than anything he'd experienced. The P-51 was thrown around like a toy. And then, at 30,000 feet, the aircraft broke apart. The tail section separated from the fuselage. Zemke was suddenly in a tumbling cockpit, spinning toward the ground. He managed to get the canopy open and bail out. The parachute deployed. He was alive. But he was over Germany again. And this time, he landed right in the middle of a German military base. He was captured immediately. No escape, no evasion, just straight from parachute to custody. For the 3rd time, Hub Zemke was a prisoner of war. The Germans sent him to Stalag Luft 1, a camp specifically for captured Allied airmen. This wasn't a normal POW camp. This was where the Germans sent high-value prisoners, senior officers, ace pilots, bomber commanders. The security was intense. The camp was in northern Germany, far from any borders. Escape was considered impossible.
Zemke assessed the situation. He was the senior American officer in the camp, which meant he was responsible for the prisoners. Escape would be difficult, but more importantly, by late 1944, it was clear Germany was losing the war. The smart move was to keep the prisoners alive and healthy until liberation came. So Zemke did something he'd never done before. He decided to stay put and wait. But he didn't wait passively. He organized the prisoners, set up a command structure, maintained discipline and morale. When the Germans tried to move prisoners west ahead of advancing Soviet forces, Zemke negotiated to keep most of the men in place. When food ran short, he organized distribution to make sure everyone got something. By April 1945, the situation in Germany was collapsing. Soviet forces were approaching the camp from the east. The German guards were getting nervous, unsure